Hey y'all, Kenny with Wild Board Studio here, and our build today is going to be a little different. Typically, my clients commission complex cutting boards and butcher blocks, but not this time. This time, my client commissioned a huge magnetic knife block made from a super figured curly maple and a really nice dark contrasting wenge wood. The entire block is going to be pretty functional, pretty decorative, and pretty badass. You already saw me get started on the base. Starting with the wenge wood, I cut all my pieces to size. From here, I'll need to make each piece completely flat. I'll do this by attaching the boards to my planer sled using hot glue and shims. This ensures the planer will make the top surfaces of each piece pancake flat. Once that hot glue is set up, I'll scribe the surfaces of the wenge with a pencil so I can visually track the flattening progress. But watching this clip, I'm reminded that I couldn't see crap with this dark wenge, so I literally just ordered these white charcoal pencils while I'm doing this voiceover. I'll let you know how well they work in the next video. With all my pieces flat, I'll remove them from the sled and flatten the other side using the drum sander. Once the other side is flat, I'll also run the planed side through the drum sander as well. I do this because the drum sander leaves a rougher surface finish on the faces, and I think that it makes for a better bond when it comes time for glue up. Okay, you just saw me square up on the jointer and the table saw, and now I'm just removing any dust and debris from each piece. And now it's time for glue. I'll load the roller with glue first, and then squeeze some more glue on the face of each piece. If you're ever going to follow these steps, make sure you have your boards laid out in the way you want them first. I screwed up here and put glue all over a face I wanted to have exposed. Fortunately, I realized what I had done, and with a little water and a little wipe, I was able to fix the problem. So, just pay attention. Glue-ups are easy to screw up. Just like I do with my cutting boards, I'll apply glue to both sides of the center pieces, or just one piece in this case. I find that this makes for a much tighter bond in the end. When laminating or face gluing, I like to cradle the entire assembly in parallel clamps. I apply just enough lateral pressure to keep the boards aligned and prevent them from shifting as I bring in the bar clamps for the main clamping force. It's the next day and the base is now one solid hunk of wenge. And it needs to be cleaned up and squared up. I'll affix the base of the block to my workbench using my bench dog clamps, and clean off all the excess glue squeeze out using my belt sander and an 80 grit belt. This whole process is supposed to be quick and easy and not cost me money. But it doesn't always work out that way. Heading on over to the jointer, I'll further refine the clean edge of the base. I already know the bottom of the base is totally flat from my previous steps, so I'll use that to index off the jointer fence. This results in a perfectly square edge. And from here, I'll continue to square up and dial in my final dimensions at the table saw. Oh, so satisfying. Moving over to the miter saw, I'll hack the rough ends off of both sides of the base to square it up, leaving room to bring it to its target length later. While doing this, I uncovered a small hole, likely from this little demon. A powder post beetle. This little sapsucker once called this piece of wood home. We'll clean it up later. With the wenge base clean and square, it's time to move over to the curly maple face. With rough lumber, it's important to cut the first quarter inch or so off first. This bit is typically either painted, rough and splintered, or not square. So, as you saw, I marked my cuts, set up my stop blocks, and huffed a bunch of sawdust. Now we're going to run through the exact same flattening steps on this curly maple as we did with the wenge, but I'm not walking you through that again. Instead, since you're still here watching, I'm going to take this moment to urge you to subscribe to the channel. But don't give me a pity sub. I honestly only want you to hit that button if you're actually enjoying what you're seeing. Kidding. I'll take pity subs all day long. So by all means, subscribe. Consider it your good deed of the day. Making our way over to the bandsaw, I'm going to resaw this piece of curly maple so I could book match the grain patterns on the front face of the knife block. This step is purely aesthetic, but when it comes to badass knife blocks, it's totally necessary. Before I can glue these pieces together, I need to get them to the same thickness. I'll do that at the drum sander. And from here, it's time for glue. When gluing thin boards like this, I find it helpful to pinch the boards together with a couple of spring clamps before applying the glue. This keeps both pieces held together nicely, allowing me to have both hands free. I can now lay them flat in the clamps and slowly and evenly apply clamp pressure. I'll also add some cawls to prevent any slippage while under clamp pressure. Remember, use cawls if you want flat panels. And back to the base. Earlier I mentioned that we would hit the target length on this thing later. Well, now is later. I set my miter gauge to 90 degrees and expand the width to accommodate the length of the base. I like to set the blade about half a tooth above the workpiece for cleaner shearing cuts. Also to reduce kickback by minimizing the lifting force from the rear teeth should the stock shift during the That almost really sucked. Had it landed directly on top of that blade, it certainly would have left a mark. But let's pretend it never happened and just move on. I'm a huge fan of the bow feather board. I find that the foam feathers do a remarkable job keeping the workpiece flush against the fence while also being really gentle to it. Now we're honing in the final thickness of the base. Planer first, then drum sander. I like this order, especially with wenge. If you've ever worked with it, you probably know why. It's notoriously splintery. My planer cuts clean most of the time, but when it doesn't, the drum sander cleans up most of those splinters and brings it right to the target thickness. Remember this guy? Let's run through and take care of that little hole. I'll start by removing all the crud left by the beetle, and slowly layering in black CA glue as the filler. I'll apply a few drops of glue, spray it with some accelerator, and continue to repeat this process until the glue is slightly above the surface of the wood. Doing it this way will allow the glue to set evenly through the depth of the hole. Once the glue is all set up, I'll hit it with some 80 grit sandpaper to flush it up with the surface of the base. With it sanded and flush, I hit it with some alcohol and wipe it clean to verify all looks good. I use alcohol in this case as it won't pop the grain in the way that it would if I had used water. Okay, a lot of back and forth here. We're setting the base aside again and moving back to the face. We'll go ahead and yank it out of those clamps and then run it back through the drum sander to clean up all the glue squeeze out. This is a super critical step for the upcoming glue up. Using my ridiculously overkill T-square, I begin marking out the face shape and preparing my next cuts. You know, if you look close enough, it almost looks like I know what I'm doing. Okay, out with the miter gauge to hack off the end of the face and to bring it to the final length. For this step, I needed to make a giant template, so using a site called, get this, rasterbaiter.net, I went ahead and made a big long template. The name of the site is a little sketch, especially if you're prone to typos. But with that said, it's a sweet free service you can use to create templates and posters. So check them out, and if you really like them, be sure to leave a tip on your way out. And it's magnet inlay time. Using a straight edge piece of scrap cherry as my fence, I'll go ahead and inlay 3 channels on the back side of the front face. As you can see here, I'm not creating these channels in one pass. I'll do about 3 passes per channel. With the channels in, I'll run a thin bead of medium thick CA glue along each channel. No need to go crazy here. Note that I'm doing this on my cast iron table saw top. This allows the magnets to set firmly on the bottom side of the channel while the glue dries. As you saw, I went ahead and sprayed each channel with accelerator for good measure. Now we'll remove it from the table saw top and get ready for another lamination glue up. We'll be attaching the front face to the back face of the block. I'll trace my outline again, this time on the front face, so that I know where my magnets are located inside the workpiece. Again, just like I did with the base, I'll cradle the entire glue up in parallel clamps and apply very minimal pressure. Doing this will prevent any slippage between the two pieces as I increase the clamping pressure with the bar clamps. And as part of my normal practice, I apply glue to both workpieces. Because my clamps only go so deep on the workpiece, I'll apply a heavy weight to the center of the workpiece, or in this case, my trusty train track. Now it's time to go to town with these clamps. I'll apply each clamp opposite the next. I do this in an attempt to better apply even pressure throughout the workpiece. Think of it like tightening up the lugs on your car's wheel. You'll do opposite lugs at a time, and if you didn't know that, well, now you do. And if that's all you learn in this video, well, we both win. With the face out of clamps, we'll go ahead and start cleaning up the edges. That's best done on this oscillating spindle sander. It does a pretty dang good job of removing material quick. We'll now need to hone into the final dimension even further, starting at the table saw and then moving over to the bandsaw. Because I traced the curve of the block face prior to the last glue up, now I know I'm not going to be cutting through any magnets. Which would probably be an interesting experience with my mostly steel bandsaw. But I'll go ahead and say it's best to avoid that. Have you ever planned every move to keep mistakes away and then invite one in at the very end? Like invited a big one in? Yep, that's what I did here. I knew this could be a possibility during the entire build, and I went ahead and stepped in it like I stepped in my dog's caca. Let me explain what you're seeing here. The top channel on the backside seemed to be a little deeper than the other two, and sanding the face thinned the front so much that you could see right through it. As subtle as it is, it's a fail. Time to start over. It's a good thing I'm used to this. Is it weird that I feel a little out of breath? Anyway, back to the base. Now I need to measure and mark out the mortise location for the base. Once I have it marked out, I'll set up my fence and route it out the same way I did the back side of the front face. First, I'll zero out my router over here, and once I get that all set, I'll continue to make passes until I get to the desired depth. Notice how I'm being smart this time and actually wearing a face shield respirator. Not only is wenge splintery, as I mentioned before, but the dust from this wood is the absolute worst. The wood is chock full of silica. When you cut or sand it, the silica particles mix with the dust. This makes the dust a super abrasive, almost like a fine grit sandpaper in the air. It'll irritate your skin, eyes, and lungs faster than most hardwoods. And most medical professionals today will agree that it causes delayed onset black booger-itis too. You want to steer clear of that. Off to the router table to cut in the roundovers on the corners. This step is also purely aesthetic, but for the same reason as book matching the front face, it's also necessary. Speaking of the face, let's hop back to it, because it's time to put in the tenon. I'll do this at the router table using a straight bit. And if you notice, you'll see my trusty bow featherboard working hard, keeping my workpiece in place. Needless to say, if you don't have one, maybe consider getting one if you can. They're pretty helpful. Yes, that was a shameless indirect sponsor request, Bo. With the sides routed out, I'll now notch out the ends using my pull saw. This will allow the tenon to fit flush in the mortise. And because the tenon is squared, the mortise needs to be also. I'll grab my chisels and knock the rounded edges off, squaring them up. Needless to say, this process goes by much easier with sharp chisels. Now, I'm not saying my chisels aren't sharp or anything like that, but they're from the that place. I'm actually pretty pleased with the fit right off the bat. I'll just need to do a little rounding of the tenon, and now we could send her home. Now we'll spend a good bit of time sanding these things smooth. We'll start with the base. I'll slowly move through the grit, starting with 80, making my way to 120, 180, and stopping at 220. I'll finish with 320 after some edge refinement. Sanding is one of those processes you can't just rush through, because it will show in the end. I mean, after all that hard work, and in this case, double, why rush the finish? It's best to just take your time and get through it. My client requested the Roman ogee edge for this base. This typically isn't an edge I'll gravitate to, but I think for this particular piece, it really complemented it. I think it gave it an awesome bit of character that ties in really well with the face. Applying my maker's mark was something I totally used to dread. I can't tell you how many of these things I've screwed up. I mean, it's literally one of the last steps. But, like anything, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, and the less likely you are to screw it up. That's the idea anyway. I'll set the diode to the correct height using the focus spacer, and leave the rest to the laser. I used to do this entire process with a branding iron, but I was only limited to one size. Now I could change the size up to whatever I want. With the etch complete, I'll hit it again with 220 just to clean it up. In an effort to remove all the sharp corners and splinters, I'll go ahead and give it a soft round over on the bottom. Using my 5-inch Festool Rotex, I'll give it a good once-over with 320. This thing does a fantastic job dialing in that fine finish. And I'll repeat the same thing with the face. Using the same roundover bit I used for the bottom of the base, I'll soften the left, right, and top of the face, leaving the bottom untouched. I'll do this to both sides. I leave the bottom alone because I want it to butt up flush against the top of the face. Wow, it's really starting to come together now. With a damp rag, I'll water pop the entire thing and then do a final sanding with 320. It looks like I didn't record that sanding. You're welcome. I do this to help prevent any future water popping when it gets into my client's hands, should the piece get wet or damp. Now it's time to make it official. I'll brush wood glue across the entire surface of both the mortise and the tenon. I'll also brush a light layer around the perimeter of the mortise's top surface. This will help the bottom of the face and the top of the base come together in a seamless fit. Doing this also created a considerable amount of squeeze out, which was expected. So I got a little pro tip for you. When you encounter squeeze out on the 90-degree joints, I find the best material to remove it is the plastic cover of those cheap 5-star spiral notebooks. I just cut a little square out and bend it to fit the corner and then scoop out all the squeeze out. It works excellent. And the moment we've all been waiting for. Time for the finish. Using a cotton rag, I'll spread a liberal amount of Wild Board conditioner, available at wildboardstudio.com, all over the entire surface of the block. For anything that comes in contact with food, or comes in contact with something that comes in contact with food, I always gravitate towards a food-safe finish. This stuff is only made up of 2 food-safe ingredients: triple-filtered organic beeswax and food-grade mineral oil. So it'd be weird, no doubt, but if you wanted, you could lick your board. Remember earlier how I was talking about doing everything you can to avoid mistakes, only to invite them in happily with open arms? What you saw right there was me way over tightening that screw and breaking the head off, which is exactly the last thing we want to deal with on a commissioned project that's 99% complete. But here we are. So, to protect the workpiece, I'll put masking tape all around the screw. And luckily, there was just enough of the screw still protruding from the workpiece for me to get some purchase with the vice grips. Once I was good and clamped, it was easy peasy from there. With the screw finally out, I went ahead and drilled the hole a little bigger and reapplied the rubber foot, which was the final step. As always, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you really liked it, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.